Bum ba dum bum bum. Fucking fantasy. Dum 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 dum. Bum ba dum bum bum. Stratos arrows. Ba da 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 da. Bum ba bum 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 bum. War of Nerds. Bum ba da da bum bum bum. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the War of Nerds podcast. I hope you enjoyed that intro. I am the Funky Fantasy Man, and I'm also out of breath.
I'm Alfred Muller.
And I'm Ryan Morgan, also known as Stratos. I had to bust a lightsaber out this time since I didn't in our last Star Wars one. I know, super disappointing.
You fulfilled your destiny, young Felgen, and henceforth will be known as Darth Eros.
Ooh,
And doesn't it though? I thought it sounded like a pretty cool Sith name. Okay, you know what? Around the world. Tonight, guys, it's a Star Wars episode. So, as we promised from our last one, we are covering the last live-action movies as well as the animated series. But my first question, around the world, if you could choose your own Sith villain name, what would it be?
So, I don't know that I would be a Sith, but I do like
No,
Darth
you
Eros.
don't get the choice. This is a question about being a Sith.
All right, well, I was going to go Gray Jedi because I just think that concept is unexplored and really
You know
cool.
what? You have it, Gray Jedi.
But if I did, oh man.
If you had to be a Sith, if you were going to be Gray Jedi, what would it be?
Well, I mean, I always like Stratos Arrows. It's my first Dungeons and Dragons character, and I use it for everything. So if I could choose, that would be it. And your Darth Arrows actually sounded really cool. So I mean, I might have to go with that. But
there you go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take. So in my books, I have the archangels. Their names are Siap and Zaldoon. So I would go with Darth Zaldoon.
I like that one.
And mine would be Lord Vicious Rawl. And it's actually a character from my the Guardians of Zyderia dark fantasy universe. And it's just it's just a cool name, Vicious Rawl, Lord Rawl.
Yeah,
so that would be it. So let's start off by talking about the Han Solo movie, the live action. And contrary to popular opinion, which was people hated it, I love the Han Solo movie. And I don't know about y'all, but honestly, the dude who played the young Han Solo, I thought he nailed the role. They had Donald Glover play Lando Calrissian, which I thought was perfect. Emilia Clarke played whoever she played. She was cool. She was a good character. It showed that Han had, love interest before Leia, and of course Woody Harrelson always nails his roles. So Tobias Beckett, which is actually killed one of the most famous bounty hunters in Star Wars history. So they kind of just threw that in there nonchalantly. But I give Han Solo a solid 8.8 out of 10.
Wow. So my personal opinion, I think it was hard to go into that movie as a fan wanting a Han Solo movie. And I feel like they were trying to create Han Solo instead of just embracing who he was. So I felt disconnected with it. I didn't like the direction the story went. I loved the casting. I think everybody in that movie landed perfect, but you had the ultimate opportunity to make it a buddy movie between Han Solo and Chewbacca. And Chewbacca always felt like a side character that had less purpose in that movie than he should have. And I do like some of the things they answered with how he got the Millennium Falcon. I loved Lando Calrissian's character in it. I loved where they were going with parts of it, but it just as a whole, and it's one of those horrible cruxes as a fan where like you have this high expectation, and if it doesn't meet that expectation, you can't enjoy it. enough. And like, so my biases, I think, get in the way of me enjoying that movie as much as I can. But as a whole, as much trash talk as I just did about it, I would definitely give it like a 6.5 out of 10. It's on the higher side of some of the movies, especially the later ones they've done.
Before Alfred goes, you did remind me of a couple things, so 8.1.
Okay. I didn't want to bring your score down that far. I'm sorry, but
No, it's not that far really when you think about it. Just 8.8 to 8.1, still in the
Sure.
eights.
yeah.
Hit it, Alfred.
I didn't watch it. It was around the time where the second Star Wars movie came out, and I was so done, so frustrated with the Star Wars franchise. I was like, I can't, you can't force me into it. But my cousin did see it, and he loved it. He loved it for what it was. He was like, it's a great movie. You got to watch it. He's tried to get me to watch it over and over and over again. And I haven't gotten around. I do want to watch it because I feel like a failed Star Wars fan if I don't. But uh,
Watch it.
You will
I
watch this movie.
I thought that at least from the coming attractions I saw, I do agree the casting was great. I think that you can see that Han Solo compared to Harrison Ford, and I think that was a good choice there. But that's all I really have to say.
Okay.
That's all right.
You will watch the movie, and when you have, you will give us your honest feedback.
That's fair. Maybe that'll be something
But
for
I
the
So,
do.
Patreon or something.
I mean,
yeah,
to kind of spitball off of that, I do think that is what the trilogy that we kind of trash talked in our last episode about this did to the fans, though. It made them not want to see all the other content. Because right now, if Star Wars wants to be successful, they got to stop going into the future and building off of what's there. Go to the old Republic. Do something completely different where the characters don't exist for a large part of your fan base and introduce them to some of those other characters. Because right now, like the Han Solo movie, if you were so pissed off at what would it be, 7, 8, and 9, of course you're not going to want to watch it. You're not going to want to watch Rogue One. You're just be like, no, I'm done with this. Another movie comes out and it's number 10 of the series. Or even no, those weren't canon. We're gonna start over and make a new number 7. No, you lost so many fans with what you did there. So I can understand where you're coming from there.
I'll
I
agree and
think
disagree with you. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think like look at the Mandalorian. It's a no-name bounty hunter Mandalorian that you get to be introduced to and grow with, and I love that series. That got me back into watching Star Wars because I love Jon Favreau, and when I heard that he was doing the story and the directing and everything, I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, and I loved it. But I agree, Ryan. They need to dig back into that lore they said didn't exist anymore and create stories out of that.
And not only Jon Favreau, but Dave Filoni, the creator of Rebels and the Clone Wars. But we'll get into that. To agree and disagree with you, Ryan, you are right. They did piss off the Star Wars fans to the point where they didn't want, but also not enough to deter them from Rogue One. Remember, Force Awakens came out in 2015. Rogue
Mhm.
One came out after that, and
Yeah.
so did Han Solo. So there still were people who were willing to, and that brings us to Rogue One, and in my opinion, is up there with Empire Strikes Back and Revenge of the Sith. It is one of the best Star Wars movies ever done and goes to prove you don't need lightsabers to have a good Star Wars movie, even though we all knew what would happen to those characters at the end of the movie. We all knew they'd all die, but we still loved it.
But I think that's what they did so well in Rogue One is you knew they died, but the way they filmed it, you thought there was a chance. You were there in the moment going, but no, they just have to do this one thing. They just have to hit this one. It's so close. They're going to escape. No, maybe we were told wrong. Maybe
They just
and
got
no.
nuked. So, um, and I loved who they chose to play the angry Imperial um officer, the guy who was in Ready Player One, and he
Mhm.
was also I can't think of his name right now, but he's a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
Um, And man, just that Darth Vader scene at the end where he comes on and the lightsaber just like the rated X version of Darth Vader just slaughtering rebellion troops on the cruiser. Like it was so cool. I was like, dang, where was this in A New Hope? I wanted to see that, bro.
So
Alfred, you look like your brain's spinning, brother. Give it to us.
I liked it more than what's the eighth movie called?
The Last Jedi.
Last Jedi, yeah, that one. I liked it more than that. I liked it more than the prequels. I did not love it. Uh, I love the Vader scene for the cinematography, the dark room, and then a red lightsaber lighting up. Like I said, with Force Awakens, I love the same dark, and then you get the blue lightsaber. I did not have any care for the characters. I felt they were, and this is the exact opposite of what you guys said. So it's one of those rare times we disagree. But I felt they were rushed. I felt they were forced into being something. I thought the love interest was like the love story between the characters were meh. I did like the way they explained how the Death Star, it wasn't just a, oh, well, they're the mustache twirly villains who can't think or anything, that it was a sabotage. I like that aspect of it. I
Yeah.
just feel like that some of the dialogue was stunted, and I did not love it. My buddy and I talked a lot about this movie because, again, I was on the fence with Star Wars films at this point, so we talked so much about it, and he got me from hating it to at least enjoying it. Uh, so I did enjoy Rogue One, but I did not. I thought that they could have done better to make them uh, feel like they would survive. So I actually had the opposite effect, Ryan. I didn't. I never believed they were going to survive, and that's part of the problem that I had with it. Is that I was like, you could have done so much with these characters, and you went a weird way that lost me and didn't actually give me the feeling that they would survive. I thought they were supposed to do that, and it fell flat. Now, it may have just been me as I was watching it, and I know a lot of people loved Rogue One. They put it up there like Nathan did with like top tier Star Wars. I thought it was okay, but I was not as in love with it as everybody else.
I
Can you
mean,
at least admit? Oh, sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
I was just going to touch on, I think going into it, I had the same mentality. I went into the movie 300, and it kind of goes to that military sacrifice that like people that serve do have. But like when you know the story of the 300 and then you watch the movie and you're like, they knew it was an impossible task, they knew it was suicide, and they still chose to do this. And then to watch the same thing, of course, since we've seen 1 through 6 by now, when we get to Rogue One, we know they don't survive. We know it's an
Yep.
impossible task. In a few moments, they think it's not an impossible task, and then they're like, "No, this is a daunting task that we may not survive. Here's this elaborate plan that has to be perfectly executed." So there are parts that are like reaching beyond like fathomable, like if this is the best plan you could come up with. Well, it was the only plan they had in a small window of time that kind of drew me into it. But going into the movie, I had that 300 mentality of like, I know and I want them to, because they made me like the characters. And again, if they didn't make you like the characters, I can see it having the complete opposite effect, because you're like, well, they did their job, but oh well, they died. But at least the plans got to who they needed to get to. But I do see if they didn't make you enjoy those characters, it would fall extremely flat.
Yeah, like when
The
when
reason you
Daniel
didn't.
so sorry, I was just gonna say at the very end when they're like expecting the planet to be destroyed, I was like, this is so. It doesn't like never do they just give up. Like even Luke was like, throw myself down this shaft and commit suicide rather than face Darth Vader. When they just sitting there and I forget the male character's name, but he's laying in her arms and
Andor.
they're just Andor and they're just waiting for the world to be destroyed. I'm like, I would have loved if they kept going, like, and they get in the spaceship, and as they're getting ready to leave in the spaceship, it's destroyed. So they're not just sitting there waiting for their death, like, okay, I give up. Like, still try. And like I said, and actually, Ryan, you put it in beautifully. I think that's what it was. I didn't care for the characters, so I didn't care what happened. And knowing that they were going to die anyway, I was like, okay. And I was hoping for them to give me something and that's where it lost me a little bit. But I did love how they butted it right up against uh, A New Hope, where it
Mhm.
was this movie's going to end, and that's why Leia's ship was fleeing. This is where all of this led to, and you get that uh, literal butting right up against A New Hope. So I did love that aspect of it. I thought that was very cool.
You know why you didn't hate it? Is because it was the one Star Wars movie that Kathleen Kennedy was the least involved in. So there's that aspect of it. But I do understand. Um, the reason why they didn't get in a spaceship is because there were no spaceships left. So would have been
That's
a
fair.
bit harder, but I would have enjoyed seeing something too. Maybe go try to hide underground or go something that might give you a chance of survival, right? You can escape the beam, get somewhere deep underground into some bunker, maybe the tower or something has some protection mechanism, and then you've survived and then figure out how to get off of the island. But of course there wouldn't be any spaceships, but I feel you. And I will ask this question. Tell me you at least like K2SO. I thought he was the coolest droid since like sliced bread.
Oh yeah, the droid was awesome. I did love K2SO. I love the smart aleckiness. I love that, and I even like the blind Force user.
I'm one
And
with the
his
force, and the force is with me.
like that stuff was fine. I like that type of stuff because it built the world that you didn't really get
Yeah.
necessarily. So I didn't mind that stuff. And the battle scenes were very Star Wars. It was a great Star Wars
Yeah.
movie without lightsabers. The buddy of mine that I was saying that I was talking with, he hated the Darth Vader scene. I love the Darth Vader scene. It's the Darth Vader we've all wanted. It's the Darth Vader you get in comics. You get the deadly Sith that he was, or fallen Jedi, or however you want to categorize him. But
Like, I was just going to say that brings me to the next live action thing that we were going to talk about, which is the Obi-Wan TV show. And the Darth Vader in there, him straight up just pulling a Star Cruiser apart with the Force is like some Star Killer stuff from the Force Unleashed. That was so cool. Like the fights with Obi-Wan and Vader in the Obi-Wan show were spectacular. Everything else was just mediocre, in my
uh,
opinion.
I want to say in Rogue One, isn't that where the commander villain goes to Darth Vader, and Darth Vader's on the planet from Episode 3,
Mustafar.
yeah, and he force chokes him, and he has some one-liner quip.
Don't choke on your
Yeah,
ambition, Commander.
that was I hated that.
It
That's
was
so
cool,
bad.
man.
That is so bad. That's not Darth Vader in my mind. I was like, that's so bad.
Is it really not though? I mean, think about the lines Vader has in episode 4 and episode 5. He's just like, in episode 5 talking to Lando. Lando's just like, "This isn't what we agreed on, Vader." He's like, "Do you think I've been an ungracious host?" Or something along those lines. Like, really, that
Eh,
is Vader-esque dialogue when you think about it, man. I mean, and it's we're comparing that to Lucas dialogue. So, I
I
mean,
know. I was
like,
just when he said that, I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
I
But
do think
go Ryan.
I was just gonna say I kind of feel what Alfred's saying there. I do think that's more of an Anakin line than it is a Vader line. So like his youthful sarcasm coming through there as opposed to just the Vader. But I do think what you're talking about with Vader's lines later on with the gracious host, like that is still like that Anakin smart aleckness, like, but darkened down by the dark side essentially. So I mean there's a kind of a balance in between the two, but I can see that.
this is theory talk here, but perhaps those lines were thrown in there to make people wonder and consider if Anakin truly wasn't completely gone, and that there was little stretches of him there. Like in the Ahsoka TV show, they showed Anakin training Ahsoka in some like Force realm dimension type thing, and he was using his lightsaber combat form, and then he switched to Vader's form, and everybody's just like, "Well, that's not Anakin." It's like, no, that's Vader. Anakin is Vader. He's switching back and forth between the dark and the light, showing Ahsoka, he said, live or die. Make your choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that stuff is cool. It's showing us Anakin and Vader were always one and the same. Anakin is the chosen one. They say misinterpreted it might have been, as Yoda said, misread it might have been. No, I don't think so. I think Anakin is the god of the Force. He is the Force. So if the Force was an entity in the universe, and you needed a way to understand the opposite side of good, just like Jesus being born to the Virgin Mary and a human embodiment of Christ, same thing with Anakin. He would put a human body of himself, a virgin birth to Shmi Skywalker, and you have Anakin. I think we've talked about this before, but I truly believe Lucas probably wasn't thinking about that, honestly, in the original and with like Vader dialogue. But I think of just like stuff like, I want those plans and I want her alive. Like that's Vader. Like that's Prime Vader. Short and to the point, right? And like he said something and you don't think about arguing with him. Like that's Vader. Like, Luke, I am your father, and together we'll rule the galaxy as father and son. So if Vader was somebody to say quirky things the entire time he was in the elevator with Luke, you imagine he would have said something, but he said nothing. So he
And
just
I
looked
think
at him like
I think it's that whole scene too, because it's just a blank, empty space, and he's looking out over the lava waterfall and whatnot, or lava fall, and he just turns and holds his hand up, and is like, you get the profile of him, and he says, "Don't choke on your ambition." But the Vaderness, it would be like choking him to near death, and as he's groveling at his feet, something like, "Ambition will be the death of you," or something like that, something more dark and dreary. But I can and I like what you had said. I can get behind the Anakin side of that. That maybe it's the Anakin coming through. So that redeems that scene a little bit for me. But when I watched it, I
good.
despised it.
Man, this really is a war of nerds this time. Like we're actually
Love it.
disagreeing about stuff. I
I love
love it. This is fantastic.
It
As the
had to
doctor
happen
would say,
eventually.
it. Did. It did.
fantastic. Um, like perhaps Vader would have said something like you said. He would have dropped him at the feet, like when Tarkin in the room on the Death Star was just like, "Release him, Vader," and he released him. He'd say something that's just like, "Careful to mind your tongue, Admiral. The Emperor is less forgiving than I am." Like those are Vader lines. Like he's just like, "Really, because you usually choke us. That's why we got these collars to keep us from being choked when you're around."
Yeah.
If only that worked.
Will we double our efforts, Lord Vader? I hope so, for your sake, Commander.
Not to go off on another tangent, but like the Family Guy Star Wars stuff where it's like,
Oh
okay,
man,
listen, all the interns, listen, Vader's a little crazy, so just pretend like you're being choked when he does it to you. And it's like, oh, it's another dead one, and they just recycle them.
that's phenomenal. Or the YouTube parody, Full Metal Star Wars, where it's Gunny Arnie Ermey's voice with Vader's talking. So he goes, it's just like he's like, "Are you, kidding me, pile? I want 50 push-ups." He's just like, well, you want me one jelly donut.
Oh,
Um, so out of the live action TV shows, Alfred, how many have you watched? This question goes to both of you.
live action
So
TV shows.
you've got
The,
Obi-Wan,
mhm,
Ahsoka, The
mhm,
Mandalorian, Boba Fett, and
The
Andor.
Mandalorian. I've only watched The Mandalorian.
Same here. They're all on my watch list, but I have no time,
Okay,
and it's unfortunate as a Star Wars fan because I was super
fair.
looking out for Ahsoka, and then I heard like bad reviews from it, so now it's like dropped down on my watch list. But
Ignore them.
she's my favorite Jedi of
Ignore
all.
the bad
And
reviews. Ignore them all.
yeah, and I gotta stop saying that because I don't even think she's a Jedi. I don't think she's a Jedi. I don't think she's a Sith. She's the closest to what we were talking about earlier with the gray Jedi, in my honest opinion, where she truly understands that the Force is a balance and she sits on that pinnacle between the two, in my opinion.
See,
She's not a Jedi
Obi-Wan.
at all. Oh, sorry, Alfred.
I was gonna say Obi-Wan is one of my favorite characters. From old Ben Obi-Wan. I loved that character. He embodied the classic, to mesh the line between fantasy and sci-fi again, the classic old wizard mentor. Loved it. And when I heard that he was going to get his own series, I was super excited. And then I heard mixed reviews, and then like kind of like you, Ryan, it kind of dropped down on my watch list, and then a few things were spoiled for me, and I was like, I don't know if I like that. So I probably will watch it eventually, but again, I've been so
Do
burnt
it.
out, and very similar to Ryan, I have very little time. If I'm going to watch
Yeah.
something, I want to make sure I'm watching something I'll enjoy, and not just watch something and feel like I wasted time.
If you get the chance, watch it. Obi-Wan's a fun show. I mean, there's things about it that just make you wonder, kind of a lot of PTSD and things, but it's an enjoyable show. There's things that you're not going to agree with, creative decision wise, but honestly pretty decent. And Ahsoka's really good. They finally brought in, and when they teased it in The Mandalorian, I lost myself. Grand Admiral Thrawn, the coolest Star Wars character ever created, is the villain of Ahsoka, and he should have been the villain of the sequel trilogy, but what do I know? But anyways, um, so Ahsoka's great, and there is Star Wars theory lore that is being proven to blow your mind when it comes to Anakin and the Force and other universes in Ahsoka, and Thrawn's not done yet, so
Well, it's still on my
watch it.
list, and I will watch it, but other
You
things
will.
have taken priority. But I'm coming back to those, especially now that we do this podcast. There's a bunch of stuff that I've put on the back burner that I'm like, I got to get through these shows. I got to watch them. Like even Marvel, there was a certain point in the Marvel movies where um, it hit like Shang-Chi, and then everything that came after it, I just started to drop off because I didn't have the time, but also like they didn't enthrall me the same way the original set did. But I definitely, there's so many of the live actions. Like I need to catch up on Mandalorian. I watched it, but I haven't finished the most recent season yet, and that really made me want to watch Boba Fett too. But again, I haven't had a chance to watch that one either. So
Yeah.
I forgot about Shang-Chi. That was actually a good movie. Like I actually enjoyed that one.
Absolutely.
But I just forgot about it. Like, holy cow, that was back before Marvel sucked. So, yeah, I said it. So anyways, let's talk about, we'll wait till you guys have had the opportunity and more time to talk about the live action TV shows. Let's get into the stuff we have watched, the Clone Wars and Rebels. All
Oh
right,
my God.
which one you want to talk about first? I say we go in order, Clone Wars 2 Rebels.
That
Okay.
yeah.
And that we can throw the Bad Batch in there too, because that kind of, fits into there. So, though I haven't watched the Bad Batch TV show, shame on me. I know I've failed my mission as a Bad Batch fan, but the Clone Wars, man, what a fun show. Like Dave Filoni outdid himself, and not only just with the creative decisions, but just the lore and getting these characters that we saw in the live action prequels, uh, villains, heroes, whatever you name it, especially the villains, like Asajj Ventress, Darth Maul, Savage Opress, the Night Sisters, more like Dathomirian lore, Sheev
Deeper and
Palpatine.
Grievous.
Oh, Deeper Grievous, Deeper Dooku, all these years, that gap between where you saw the Clone Wars movie and then you saw Anakin with long hair flying his starship. This is where the fun begins. All that stuff that happened, him training Snips, their relationship with each other, Ahsoka and Anakin. I mean, finding out that Obi-Wan kind of had a love interest, that was pretty cool. All the stuff with Mandalore and like Bo-Katan and the Mandalorian Wars and the histories about it and the dark saber and like, ooh man, it's just like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, one of my favorite Jedi's ever. Like probably one of the best starfighter like flyers pilots was Plo Koon, and they made him go out straight up like a beep in the movie, and I was like not okay with that. Along with this, Asajj not Asajj, Ayla Secura, really on her home planet, she's just gonna go out like a beep? No, she's not. Y'all like my sound effects? I'm not actually swearing, but I thought that'd be a funny little throw. But go, y'all. take the floor. Like, what do you think about the Clone Wars? Like, it's just so much fun.
Honestly, it was so like when we talked about the original trilogy, I told you movie 2 controversially was my favorite, and it was the connection between the Jedi and the clone troopers and all of that coming together. And the Clone Wars probably played into that because I just loved the animated series, and you got to see so much more of how Jedi fight, how clone troopers came to exist, how each one of them, despite being a clone, gains its own personality over time, which led into the Bad Batch and some of the misfits that were the rejected troopers essentially that don't get to go out into battle because they weren't like quality controlled clones. And just so many of the storylines of you see all these Jedi and their Padawans and how their relationships fit. Like, I think one of my favorite storylines from the Clone Wars entirely was you see Anakin and Ahsoka, and then I'm gonna blank on her name, but you see the other Jedi and her Padawan, and Ahsoka and the other Padawan get stuck inside of a collapsed
Luminara.
building. Yes, and their relationship and how they reveal to each other the difference in relationships they have with their master, and just like a Jedi is supposed to be trained a certain way, but each Jedi master does it differently. And just that
Correct.
world that they go into with all these different storylines, it was just so well done and so well
Wicked.
animated. But I could go on forever.
You said the Bad Batch, and I just started thinking, here on the island of misfit toys.
But I mean, like, even that one character gets that redeeming when like the factory gets targeted or assaulted, and there's that one clone who's there as just trying to do his best to contribute, and he's not a soldier, but he gets his one moment of making a difference because of it.
The
And like that,
janitor. I remember that
yeah,
episode.
yeah, that
Yeah.
it's such a simple storyline, but like that he knows what he was made for and he's unable to do it, and then he gets one moment. And like that's such a compelling story in a 20-minute episode. And although like they built it up in a previous episode we were introduced to him, but like that show, just each episode had a reason. And like
So good, dude.
I can go
There,
on and on.
Man, I could too.
there's not much more I can add, but it's nice to be back on track where we all agree. Uh, but it redeemed the prequels for me. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I wasn't a huge fan of 2, wasn't a huge fan of 3. I mean, I was younger, so I still enjoyed them, but as I got older and rewatched them, I was like, eh, and that's where I kind of formed my opinions. But both Clone Wars and Rebels really brought those prequels into a new light. And again, like I said, Obi-Wan's my favorite, getting to see more information because I missed like when I watched uh episode 1, and then I watched episode 2, I was like, what the heck happened between there? And then you watch episode 2 into 3 and you're like, whoa. And then you see Clone Wars and what actually took place in the Clone Wars. It's
In
it's
between the
just
movies.
it's amazing. I
Well,
have nothing bad to say about it. And like I said, I loved that series, and you guys hit basically everything that I could have said on it.
let me excite you because of Ahsoka, the young version that played the young Ahsoka during the Clone War flashbacks when Anakin was training Ahsoka. It was the same girl that played the young Gamora in Infinity War.
Hmm.
Um, she did such a good job, and the camaraderie between Hayden Christensen's Anakin, which people finally admitted that they missed Hayden Christensen and realized he actually was a good Anakin. Um, there's talks about a live action Clone War TV show with him, Hayden Christensen as Anakin, and the girl who played young Ahsoka playing her. And I'm just like, where has that been? I've been waiting for it ever since the animated show. Anytime you want to do it would be fine by me.
I would be on board for that, but they're gonna have to pick and choose which episodes they do, I think, very wisely. Because with the live
Sure.
action, the girl's gonna grow too quick to stay young Ahsoka in that show. Like, I mean, with a lot of makeup and CGI and stuff like that, they can make it last, but they're gonna have to be which storyline do they do, and they won't be able to veer off as much as Clone Wars kind of did, because you had episodes where you'd go back to Not is it Coruscant?
Well, you talking about where
The Senate.
the Senate is in Coruscant, yeah.
Yeah. So you go back there and you're dealing with what's going on in the Republic and in the Senate and assassins and stuff like that had necessarily nothing to do with the Jedi, but would target like the Jedi temples and stuff like that. And then Cad Bane and some of the characters that they go into that you didn't really see in the movies, but they brought them into those, and then they carried out of those into other stuff as well. So I mean, they just
It's
went so
similar.
many different ways.
It's similar to what Nathan has said in the past, where it's like, how would you adapt your book or whatnot? Would you go live action or would you go animated? And that's the beauty of animation. You could have 30 seasons and span 1 year, and the characters don't
Mhm.
actually change. But with live action, if you want
Yep.
to keep it to realism and not alienate a viewer, because it happens. I mean, you're watching a show and you're like, that kid's supposed to be 15 and he looks 36. So I'm taken out a little bit by that.
Yeah.
A wee bit off topic, but maybe every time I say we, I should stop doing it in a Scottish accent. What do you say about that? Anyways, Game of Thrones, the House of a Dragon show, which was phenomenal, by the way, got a flack because the gal who played the the Targaryen girl, they switched actresses because they had this giant time gap,
Yeah.
and so they switched actresses for her for both of the girls. And I loved both of the older actresses. I thought they did a great job selecting. But there were people who didn't like it, and that's what you're going to get when you do that type of stuff when it comes to live action. So I'm team animation all the way. And man, just do you remember the episode in the Clone Wars where oh bollocks, it was they were on this, they were in space, and like Ahsoka had to like save Anakin, and she had to make all the decisions, and she had to save her master. Her
Yeah.
master was stuck with another Jedi, and she had to save them.
And it was where she was on like the large ship with the commander, but she was
With
a
the Admiral,
Jedi.
yeah,
So she's technically the highest ranking
correct.
person because of Anakin not being there. Yeah, I remember that episode.
The Admiral made a joke. He's just like, it's actually nice dealing with you instead of Skywalker for once. And as soon as Skywalker got back, he's like, "Hey, Admiral, good to see you." He's like, "Skywalker," like but just all like the deep dive into like the stuff with Mandalore and the lore about. I would have liked to. I'm glad they brought Cad Bane in. I'm Cad Bane, the best bounty hunter the galaxy's ever seen. I loved they did that whole stuff with like a young Boba Fett, showing like his intro to becoming like a full-fledged bounty hunter, about his father being like decapitated and in the Clone Wars. Like, by the way, stupid decision there. Poor decision for writing with Django, who's supposed to be a Jedi assassin. It's just gonna willy-nilly walk up to Mace Windu. Really, like that's gonna work out good for you, buddy. Like your jetpack's already messed up. I'm not gonna talk about that. But anyways, I get it. It had to happen for Boba Fett's stories, the prequels, but you could have done it better. Anyways, when it comes to the Clone Wars, that was really cool to get to see a young Boba, and like Asajj Ventress probably had one of the best arcs out of villain type characters. But this brings me back to Ryan's thing that he talked about like 10 minutes ago with Ahsoka. I don't think she's a Jedi at all, because at the end of the Clone Wars, she left the Council and she chose not to come back. Therefore, she's no longer a Jedi. She still had lightsabers, sure, and she still used the Force, but even in the live action, she's like, I'm not a Jedi anymore. And so I just think she's one with the Force, like the true nature of what the Force is meant to be, and she uses it for what she needs to. But she doesn't agree with the dogmatic views of the Jedi Council.
I'd say she's almost like a Ronin samurai. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely think she
yes, sir,
has
that was
that different mentality of she tried the Jedi way, and maybe Anakin's teachings really swayed that, but also her relationship with Anakin, because it was like a very weird. I don't want to say weird, but it was like they had a tension, like there was a relationship, but they didn't. But they also had like a brother sister thing, but they also had like a father daughter thing, and they just had all these relationships wrapped up in one, and they all made sense. They all played
Yeah.
off of each other. She truly loved him as a person, like through admiration, and that played on every decision she made. When he would make bad decisions, she would question it but also feel indebted to follow him, and when she saw him slipping, she wanted to be the one to save him, even though she really couldn't be the one to save him.
I mean,
And
we
she
are
was a
talking
good
about
friend.
Anakin.
Yeah.
We are talking about Anakin. He had some very weird relationships, so
Yeah,
it just
this is
fits.
true.
There is loads of memes on Reddit and across the internet about Ahsoka and Anakin and stuff for after hours that we can talk about. But I do believe that it was like a brother-sister relationship that they had, honestly.
Mhm.
Like she loved him like a brother and he loved her like a sister. And, you know, she was kind of, it was a similar case to kind of Anakin. She was a bit older for being training with her master. Like she did go to like the academy like all the other kids did on Coruscant, learned with Yoda and all this other stuff, but she was a bit older at the start of the Clone Wars, seeing her with Anakin. And Anakin was what, 11 or 12 by the time that Obi-Wan found him, and I mean Luke was 19 by the time the start of a New Hope. So he was a whole different case. But point being, I think the whole age thing is kind of silly, where they're just like, oh, he's too old to begin his training. No, I don't think the age should have anything to do with it, to be quite honest. Um,
I
because
think
the
that's
Force, if the Force, what's that?
I was just gonna say that that's kind of like a trope in fantasy kind of style where it's like we've been training with these swords for all of our life. We're nobles. We were born into this kind of training, and you have the main character enter, and they're past their prime or past when they would have been chosen to train, and they end up being the best because they're more dedicated. So I think that's kind of what they were going for with it. But I agree with you. The age shouldn't matter in the grand scope of things.
Yeah. And when it comes to fantasy, like I kind of want the non-traditional route, because I thought the whole age thing was kind of silly. So like my characters, their parents wouldn't allow them to train with magic or weapons until finally like last moment, when something was brought to their attention about a child that they had in the past, where it something bad happened. But then they were taken to, they lost their life basically, and then come back 8 years later. So 16 and 19, and they are now starting their true training. And I kind of like that whole trope. Like they're gifted, yes, just like Anakin was, just like Luke was, but they still have to learn all of these things, and it's like they're playing over a decade's worth of catch up. Do you like ketchup on your ketchup? I do, but make sure you add in some mustard. This show is sponsored by Nathan's Quirky Puns. Thanks for listening. Um, the Office meme. No, God, no, please, no. Probably what everybody's screaming as they listen to us or watch us.
Nah.
Nah, look at our beautiful faces. Don't you love us all? I mean, look at our smiles. They're just so crisp and perfect. Anyways, just kind of the way we smiled when we watched the sequels. Yeah, I said it. So, he said as he gritted his teeth and lied.
Touching on what you were going there with the young age thing, with training the
Yeah.
Jedi Padawans. I think that was such a flawed system to begin with, because they kept like hyping about like they have to start at a young age and be trained a certain way, and you see so many different versions of that go awry because they're not exposed to
Yep.
some of the emotions. And that was obviously, the Sith had embrace your negative emotions and channel it into anger, but that blinded you to logic and sacrifice,
Hmm.
um, to defeat your opponent, and the Jedi side not having that love and compassion, where it strengthens certain characters along the line, and each side had like a very, it has to be this way in order to be the strongest version of yourself, and all the characters that end up somewhere in that gray area in between the two, Anakin and one, because Anakin had the logical sacrificing himself and people to save his loved ones, but also being able to channel his anger and his rage into power, but also going back to like making logical decisions. Like when he swayed back and forth, that was when he was at his strongest. When he was one way or the other, like, yeah, he was at his peak in his dark side, but I still think, like we were talking about earlier, he drew on specific things and being on the other side to make himself just as strong, because like he could have easily been the emperor's puppet by use of mind, and yes, he was manipulated, but he very easily could have just been a, I say this, you do it, and there's no question. But Darth Vader always kind of had that, yeah, I know you're stronger than me, but I'm still, you picked me for a reason kind of wall.
Yep.
And I think he had that from being a Jedi. He knew he could mentally close himself off to a little bit of what the Emperor could do, and he couldn't fully be like manipulated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like
I
the
think
thing
he
with
found.
the.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nathan. I've been talking over you. You go first.
No, you go, brother. You're good.
I do like the fan theories. Like if Qui-Gon hadn't have died, that he would have trained Anakin and taught him how to
Mhm.
use both. Because Qui-Gon's probably the closest thing you get to before you get Ahsoka, where he didn't toe the line, but he was willing to dabble in it. He was willing to do
Yep.
whatever needed and not be afraid of emotions. And I think that's why he picked Anakin. He saw something truly great in him before the whole midichlorian fan fiction. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think that stuff's really cool because just like you were saying, Ryan, I think that type of Jedi master would have taught him how to properly channel those emotions. Where Obi-Wan, as great of a Jedi as he is, he's not a teacher. He's kind of like the cookie cutter. I'm very good at what I do, but I can't teach somebody else because I don't know how to explain it if you don't get how I understand it.
Mhm.
And I think Qui-Gon was like, no, I get what he's dealing with. I can help him
Mhm.
as well as help you.
Obi-Wan was a master at what he did. He was a warrior. He was somebody you would send, like they sent him to fight Grievous, right? Like he's good at what he's good at. He's a defensive style lightsaber duelist. He studies his opponent's, moves, and then he uses the weakness, his opponent's attacks against them. That's why he was able to just cut Grievous up and then eventually kill him in the most like obvious way you would think nobody would ever think of. Grab a blaster and pew 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 pew. But the whole thing with like, what if, a whole Marvel's what if episode of if Qui-Gon survived. And if he did, Qui-Gon was another one of those people who, I mean, he teetered the line. He tried the dark side. After his wife was killed in the Star Wars lore in the books, he went over to the dark side, like full out, but he came back. And there's not very many people who can do that. Not many people who have done it besides Revan, Luke, Qui-Gon. And I guess really you could consider Anakin too, because he did eventually come back thanks to Luke. Um, and that kind of brings me to Rebels, which is my favorite animated, just really my favorite Star Wars show, Star Wars material in general. Yeah, I'm a Thrawn fanboy. All right, I've talked about it before. Um, and he's such a unique character. He comes from the Chiss Empire, the Chiss homeworld, which is in the past the outer reaches of the galaxy. It's in a different galaxy. So the Chiss are an unknown obstacle to pretty much all who encounter them. Now, Thrawn encountered Anakin like during the Clone Wars when he was still a Jedi, and Thrawn studied him and met him and Padme, and he remembered that even when he was talking to Vader, he got this impression like Do you remember an Anakin Skywalker? Do not say that name in my presence. Like, oh, bro, did I strike a nerve? Like, sorry, did I hurt your feelings? The Emperor, the Emperor chose me. Vader gets so mad in the books at Thrawn. Oh, dude, Thrawn strikes nerves, and like Vader, you can tell his blood is boiling, but he dares not do anything. You can't read Thrawn, man. He's got this straight poker face the entire time. These red eyes and this calm, collective voice, and he loses his crap a couple times, where he's just like, "What did you say?" And he like acts like he's gonna do something, and then he's just like, "Very well," and you're just like, "Bro, who even are you?" But he's the most strategic mind the Empire ever had, and he reached the rank of Grand Admiral in 4 years. 4. You know how long it took Tarkin to become a Grand Moff? Like the entire Clone Wars plus. That's a stretch of like 10, 15 years before Tarkin became a Grand Moff. And here comes Thrawn and does it in 4 years. And everybody hated him for that fact. But he was smart. He was so smart. But Ezra still beat him because, Team Ezra Bridger. You get some. Anyways.
I think
What's
Rebels
you
took
you know?
Clone Wars and kind of followed the fan base. And I love
Yeah.
when shows do that, where it's like, okay, so you were young, because I mean, I was young when Clone Wars came out, and then by the time Rebels came out, I mean, I was probably high teens, young 20s, I think, something in that range. When did Rebels come out?
So Rebels came out in like 20. Clone Wars started in like 2000 in it started in the after 2010. Clone Wars
Yeah,
came out after 2010, and Rebels came out. Well, you know what? Actually, I'll just if you guys want to keep the
2014.
conversation, 2014 is when
2014.
it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was in my mid 20s when, or young 20s when Rebels came out. So
Yeah,
I knew, like, I had younger siblings that were watching it with me, and like Clone Wars was kind of like you could put it on Cartoon Network, and I think it was on Cartoon Network, and
Yeah.
it
yeah,
was like
it was.
for a variety of ages. But then you take Rebels, and it had a maturity to it that the kids who started watching Clone Wars would have grown into, and be like, I can handle these more adult themes, these deeper meanings, and not just the cool action scenes. Like I can actually grasp what's going on here. Like there's some deep issues that this show is touching on that maybe Clone Wars kind of skated over, and I think that was kind of cool.
Like the scene where old Darth Maul uses the same attack that he used against Qui-Gon to try and take old Ben, and old Ben just straight one-shots him and then holds Darth Maul in his arms as the man passes away. And the motion in that scene is completely much more mature than anything the Clone Wars ever did. And you're like, dang. And you have the whole scene with Darth Maul and Ezra teaching Ezra. He's just like, use the dark side, use both of the Force to do this. It's like, Ezra Bridger. And he like straight up, he blinds Kanan Jarrus. By the way, can we all say hashtag save Kanan Jarrus? Rest in peace. All right. We could have had him in the live action Ahsoka, man. But no, he had to die. So it's rip territory. But man, like Darth Maul is one of my favorite characters of all of Star Wars, and I don't classify him as a Sith. He was abandoned and deceived um and what's the word when somebody turns on you? He was
Betrayed.
Betrayed.
betrayed by Sidious. So Sheev, one of the coolest scenes in Rebels. No, that wasn't actually in Clone Wars. He takes both of his lightsabers out and dual wields against Savage Opress and Darth Maul. And this is Maul's brother, right? And the Night Sisters, created them both. They gave Darth Maul his cybernetic attachments and made Savage who he was. And then Sidious straight up kills Savage and almost takes out Maul, but Maul gets away because I think Asajj Ventress shows up like last minute, if I remember correctly.
I think you're
Because
right.
she's kind of pissed off too. I don't remember. It's been a minute since I've watched. Um, but can we just say how well they did with the selection of voice actors that they
Yeah.
picked to play the characters? I mean, you can't beat Christopher Reed because the dude is a legend and rest in peace. But the dude who played Tyrannus was honestly really good voice actor for him. Um, and I like that we got to deep dive into Dooku's story a bit more, kind of
Yep.
like Grievous, because live action, you ask people about Grievous, and it's like he was a joke. He was a character that like looked cool in theory, but he was just kind of like pathetic, actually. But when you really deep dive into like the history of like his alien species and how he was created and trained, like, oh man, like Grievous is a really cool character.
Mhm.
But that's
I mean,
sorry, Clone Wars territory.
yeah, but you still you should get the teasers of like he's basically a Jedi assassin. He's got all these lightsabers from the Jedis he's killed, and then there's
Yep.
like he does okay, and he faces one-on-one with Obi-Wan, and it's like okay, this is somewhat of a fight, but he's basically just thrown out there, and nothing about his backstory is really shown. It's like yes, he's done all this stuff, but then in the main fight he dies. Like there was no like 4 arms. He could have taken on 4 Jedi and still come out almost on top. If you had had Obi-Wan with 3 other Jedi, those 3 Jedi die, and Obi-Wan's the one who defeats him in the end. That would have, I think, built up the character in the live action as opposed to what we actually got.
They did do a good job though. In the movie, Anakin's just like General Grievous. I expected you'd be taller. And in the Clone Wars, you watch, and I kept an eye out for it, and Anakin never met Grievous. So they did do a good job to make sure that they kept that accurate to the movies, to where Anakin met him for the first time in. But he met Obi-Wan before. That's why he Kenobi, like he knew him, right? Um, but like you were saying, 4 arms, four Jedi. It just goes to show you, and you're like, yeah, he's a Jedi assassin. But Sheev Palpatine, one lightsaber, and just straight up just one shots 3 very very well trained Jedi masters, including Kit Fisto, which by the way he went out again like a beep. But anyways, it's Sidious though.
Yeah.
He's capable of doing that. And they're like, oh yeah, Mace Windu, he uses the pod. He channels the dark side in order to use a stronger lightsaber technique against Sith Lords. You're right, he does. They're like, he could have beat Sidious. No, he couldn't have. Not in his wildest dreams. Sorry, folks.
Sidious went
Literally,
toe
Sidious
to
was.
toe with Yoda, even though Yoda I think is more force heavy than lightsaber heavy, but he's still the
Yeah.
greatest Jedi Master that we've ever seen for the most part. And he went toe to toe with him, and still basically almost. And Yoda was so embarrassed that he was defeated, went into exile because of it. So sorry, Mace,
Yep.
you don't stand a chance.
You remember the stupid face he made against Mace, where he's just like there's a little thing back, and he's just like, whoa. He's like, hey, Anakin, I told you, the Jedi are taking over. He's like, the prisoners of the Sith must never return. You have lost. I need him. Don't kill me. Please don't. And like, Mace is holding up his hand, like, just like looking like, first of all, bro, you had your lightsaber down an inch away from his throat, and you're gonna raise it up in the air when you could have just straight up just like straight down. But no, you're gonna waste dramatic effect. It's like an anime thing. And like do, 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 do. And they're like, hey, please don't. Anakin, no. And it's like, ah! Bro, you had to have seen that coming. Come on, man. Like, sorry for any of you listening if I blew your eardrums out. Apologies. But if you go back and you watch carefully and you look at Mace Windu's the part of his blade that's right next to the hilt, when Sidious's force lightning hits it, it actually bends slightly. His blade bends. That's how strong Sidious's force lightning is. That it can bend a lightsaber. Because remember, a lightsaber, a kyber crystal, is based off of a Jedi's connection to the Force,
Mhm.
how strong their connection is. Their blade is an extension of their abilities. So if they are wavering in the Force or they're being overpowered, a blade can bend. It's only happened a couple times, but that's how strong Sidious is. That
Could
he
you?
could
So
bend Windu's. Mm-hmm.
I hate to go on another tangent, but could you imagine if
Do
the
it.
sequel series were done so much better, and Snoke was Mace Windu, because Mace Windu's connection to the Force was shattered by that moment. That it wasn't just when Anakin cuts off his hands; it's that when Sidious's power, it actually breaks the kyber crystal and shatters Mace Windu's connection to the Force. Because imagine what a Jedi would do if they were so ingrained in the Force, especially a Jedi Master, and now all of a sudden that connection is gone. What would you
Mhm.
do? Like that would you'd have a grudge against the Jedi. You'd have a grudge against Anakin specifically. I mean,
That was the theory, is that when his blade was bent, it actually cracked the kyber crystal and turned it into an unstable kyber crystal.
Mhm.
And then when Anakin chopped off his arm, it was too soon for the kyber crystal to explode and for the blade to extinguish. And so his lightsaber went away. And there's rumors that that kyber crystal is the same unstable kyber crystal that Kylo Ren had. And because of the experience he had from Palpatine's Force lightning, that it literally manipulated dark energy into the kyber crystal and turned it into the red kyber crystal that Kylo Ren ended up getting. Because
that
there was rumors that Snoke was a Dark Mace Windu, and that was his kyber crystal that he gave to Kylo.
that would have been
Those are
so much.
speculative Star Wars theory rumors, but it
There
would
was
make
probably
sense, would
some
it not?
intern who was on the writing block who was there, and they were like, all right, so toss out ideas, and someone must have said that, and some dummy in charge was like, no, that's a dumb idea, we're not going to use that.
I think it's a beautiful idea, and people are just salty. Um,
Mhm.
you could have had a real story there. I mean, I'm just saying, we're going to have an episode where we talk about, for y'all who are listening, where we talk about what we would have done with the sequel trilogy if we would have been the
And
ones to
prequel.
direct it and write it. Um, but yeah, that whole scene right there, which is why I love Revenge of the Sith so much, is just the things that Fury ties to Palpatine and his stuff with Plagueis. Like, I mean, did he really kill Plagueis?
I don't think
I don't
so.
know. You're gonna tell me that the one dude who knew how to manipulate midichlorians and knew about cloning techniques and all this stuff would allow you to kill him in bed? He allowed you to think that you killed him so that you would go on your galactic domination path. And once you were out of the way, Plagueis was off on some planet in the outer skirts, just building power and waiting for his moment to come back, which, boom, there's your storyline to bring him to say he was Smoke. And he was just waiting for Palpatine to be out of the picture before he made his grand move.
Now, I don't know what Lucas's original script was for the sequel series. I know it existed, but got thrown in the trash. But the thing is with the sequel series, and again, sorry, but what you get in the prequel series, and we've talked about numerous times, including Clone Wars, including Rebels, is you get the lore and you can tell Lucas's involvement, the bending of the sword, the mentioning of
Mhm.
Plagueis. What was the point of that other than potentially bringing him in the future? Because even when uh, Sheev Palpatine is telling Anakin about his master, I was like, that's going to be a villain. That's going to be somebody who's
Yep.
important, because that moment is when Anakin's like, so wait, you can cheat death, which is what he's always wanted.
Not, not from a Jedi. Like,
Exactly.
oh,
Like when he
okay,
said that, I'm like,
okay.
Plagueis is still alive. Something's gonna happen. There's lore there. You can build off of that, and that's what you get with Lucas. The execution may have been faulty at times in the prequels, but the path was there. The knowledge and understanding of the world he created was still there. It was still Lucas. It was just, ooh, I have yes men around me instead of people who are challenge my ideas. Uh,
Don't
so
like sand.
yeah,
Here's the thing. I'll take funny, punny, goofy dialogue with amazing world building and story any day of the week. I don't want this political correct, non-lore accurate character arcs that make no sense, introducing people that have no impact on the story, just to like they're gonna be in love, just to be like, okay, they don't mean anything later. Like Plagueis, man, like James Lucerno's Darth Plagueis book is one of the best Star Wars books ever written. And if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to the audiobook or read it, I highly recommend it. Very deep dive into the lore on Sidious and on Plagueis. So it's a great book.
I'll definitely check it
It's
out.
up there with Revan. It's very, very good. Chekhov's gun, right? You bring up Plagueis. Why would you talk about your master? We know it was his master. You're going to talk about Darth Plagueis the Wise. And then I love Lucas, but he should have never sold the rights. He should have kept it and done the work, or better yet, bring Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni in to do the movies, and you're golden. You're good to go. It's, anyways, but Ryan, you're the silent observer. I see the smile. Do you have something to add?
So I was kind of gonna go down the Sith pathway here of the concept of there are always only two. And I know we've touched on this before that Darth Maul was never the apprentice. He was just an assassin with a lightsaber. But I
Correct.
don't think that's accurate as far as like the whole concept. It was never only two. Like I think Sidious wanted people to think, oh, I only have one apprentice. He wanted his apprentices to think they were the only one. And each one, Dooku, Darth Maul, bringing Anakin in, he was training Anakin without training Anakin for a long time. He was prepping him to be the next, and he was just using those characters. And the whole reason the Sith had the rule of two was because you would be betrayed if you had too many. Going all the way back to the Revan and the Dark Council was always trying to betray the Emperor, and
Yeah.
like that was the whole point. And if you had a bunch of powerful beings all working towards an evil agenda, of course they're going to want to undercut each other. Of course they're going to betray each other. And Sidious was so smart to betray all of his underlings before they could betray him. He knew exactly when he was going to sacrifice the next pawn to play. So, in my honest opinion, if we were to go down fan theory without going down fan theory, Plagueis is alive and Sidious is doing Plagueis's bidding.
I like that.
And he's just being manipulated and manipulating others while doing it.
I like that a lot.
Ryan, you bring up an interesting point, dude. You remember Darth Nihilus on the Dark Council? And I mean, she was savage.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, the Emperor was like trying to take her out, but Revan was trying to be brought in. And then you've got Darth what the heck was his name? The main Sith,
Scourge.
Darth Scourge. Scourge was amazing. All these cool Siths, this huge council, all to lead, and then you had the planet eater Darth Nihilus, and that was hold of the whole planet of Malachor, and Revan and Malak going dark after going to this planet, a planet where all life was basically removed due to Darth Nihilus, like literally eating the planet.
No, that was actually the Emperor, because that's how he got his immortality. Is he ate the people from his own planet, like he absorbed them in. Nihilus was trying to stop him from doing that again, because she was a council member trying to betray the Emperor because she didn't want him to invade the Republic again and fail.
We are going to have to go deep into this on another episode because we are at the end of our time.
Yeah, but like, oh my gosh. Like, if you really think about the Sith in general, like so many possibilities could exist. And like, just to touch on one last thing with you guys talking about Mace Windu, like I truly think he's alive. Whether he was Snoke or not, I think there's a potential for a story to bring him back in somewhere down the line where he could either be evil, he could be walked away from the Force, and now he's a bounty hunter who knew the ways of the Jedi but can't use the Force anymore. I mean, you could take that story in so many different ways, and his character could hate Jedi. He could be completely loyal to Jedi. He could have turned to the dark side. Like, so many ways that could go. So
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've been fantastic as always, and we'll talk more about Star Wars in another one of our Star Wars episodes because we have many, and remember, if it's said 3 times, it means good things. And I've been Nathan Helm, the Funky Fantasy Man.
Alfred Muller.
And I'm Ryan Morgan or Stratoceros.
Dun, 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 bum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, ba-da-dum, dum, ba-da-dum, bum, bum, War of Nerds, dum, 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 dum. Peace.